We're going to wrap things up tonight with my friend, a political commentator and YouTuber based right here in Vancouver with nearly 1 million subscribers. He is J.J McCullough, and this is The Crunch. So, JJ, we just heard from BC Conservative leader John Rustad. You sat in on that interview. I mean, he's clearly shaking things up when it comes to polling, or at least the BC Conservatives are. How palatable is the BC Conservative Party? Because I look at things like the carbon tax and SOGI and think that, they're not really going to make a lot of headway in the cities.
Yeah, I mean, I was personally a little underwhelmed by that interview, I must say. I mean, I think that he seems like a decent guy.
I take that personally, by the way. Thank you.
No, not he seems like an intelligent, sort of well-informed guy. He actually seems like a real throwback politician to a sort of politician that you saw, I think, a lot in the 90s, sort of critiquing the NDP government, and has sort of adapted those criticisms to now, I guess, to bring to the current NDP government.
Yeah, I don't think calling anyone socialist has the same.
I know, but he did it. Yeah, that's true. But I think, but anyway, to get to your question, I do think that what we see from that interview suggests that the strength of the BC party is not necessarily that John Rustad is sort of catching the province on fire. It's that I think that the strength of the BC Conservative brand has risen a lot. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think that, Pierre Poilievre has, is very popular. I think a lot of people are excited within sort of the Conservative coalition to vote Conservative. And I think they just want to vote for anything that's labeled Conservative that comes in.
Even though he said in the interview he's not Conservative, Liberal, or NDP.
Which is a weird thing to say unto itself. And again, like very sort of 90s, like, well, we have to have a big coalition. And the idea that he's, they say in the reporting and all that he's open to, perhaps merging with the BC United Party and this kind of stuff. So it's again, like, it's not about him. And I think that he's not an overly charismatic person. I don't think that your average British Columbian has any idea who he is. But I do think that the fact that the media is talking about the BC Conservatives a lot more, because I think that he is impressive in a way that appeals to people like you, frankly, who know a lot about sort of the nerdy BC politics kind of type of person.
Sure.
Right. And I think that makes people like you take him a bit more seriously in a way that previous heads of the BC Conservative Party have not been taken seriously. So I think that and I think that, frankly, the decision for the BC Liberals to rebrand as BC United was a disastrous one.
Will this actually result in votes for the BC Conservatives once we get to October?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think that, at the end of the day, sort of BC political nerds like yourself and like the leader have a presumption that your average BC voter has like a very long understanding of BC political history.
Right, yeah.
Well, so I think that like increasingly in the kind of the media climate that we exist in today, like everybody is pretty much coming in cold to these elections, right? Like I think that your average British Columbian can barely remember who, like, say, Christy Clark was.
Sure,
that is like a distant figure. So I think that they're coming to this election with a sort of a clean sort of frame of reference. They don't know who the current premier is. They just know that we've got an NDP, we've got a Conservative, we've got something called BC United. Never heard of that. So I think that, he benefits from, a public that's not terribly plugged in, and two very strong party brands. NDP, which, a lot of people in this province like you said, we have a very sort of Vancouver sort of centric population these days. Over half the population is in the greater Vancouver area. And then you have the Conservative brand, which is a very strong brand as well. And a very strong brand with people that, they might not know a lot about politics, but they know that they don't like the NDP. They don't like the left. They don't like what they've seen the left doing in a kind of broad national or transnational sort of way. And so if they want to vote for something that's not NDP, they have a very clear and well understood alternative.
When we think of British Columbia as a whole, does our province lean one way or the other? Because I've certainly heard us being called the left coast. We're a little more, quote unquote, liberal, small L liberal. But then you see this surge for the federal Conservatives here and certainly the provincial Conservatives. So where would you kind of put BC on the political spectrum?
I mean, I think that we're probably more left wing than not. I mean, but, at the same time, when you look federally, a third of our seats in the parliament do go to the Conservatives. The thing about this country is that our provinces are so gigantic, right?
Yeah.
So it's like if we were in the States, British Columbia would be multiple states, and there would be like some quite conservative states that would be a component part of that. And I think that once you get outside of, the greater Vancouver area, you get into sort of the north and the interior and more rural parts of the province, you do come into a completely different culture that people like you and me, sort of downtown Vancouver hipsters, just don't really think about very much. And so I think that there is a degree to which, the strength of the BC Conservatives comes from a kind of consistently rural right-wing sort of voter bloc that votes conservative federally and is responsible for a lot of the conservative members that we have in Ottawa, and used to be the backbone of the Social Credit Party, and then kept the BC Liberals, and frankly is like the backbone of the BC Liberal Party now, because they're very much shut out of the Greater Vancouver area. So,
but you're just making it sound like there's a ceiling to a party that's labeled exclusively as conservative.
Yeah, I think that's true. Like, I think that the Conservatives have a very particular base. The Conservatives, I suppose we should say, like, the right of center sort of block of voters in BC. It has a base, it has a ceiling. And I think that the challenge for, guys like John Rustad and other sort of center-right politicians in this province, it's like, do you have a strategy to kind of like expand that base? Can you make arguments that are appealing to people that are not already inclined to vote for you? And frankly, I don't think that he's a politician that has those skills in the way that I think somebody like Pierre Poilievre at the federal level does, because he's a little bit, Pierre is more charismatic, more outgoing, and has more of an interest in trying to like make inroads in new communities. I could see John, doing well with this sort of, taking away votes from BC Liberals and sort of unseating some BC Liberal MLAs, but in, again, parts of the province where you do kind of have a more consistently right of center leaning population. So in the same way that they switch from Social Credit to BC Liberal, you can see them now switching from BC Liberal, from BC United to BC Conservative, just because that's now what Conservatives do.
Fascinating. JJ, appreciate your time tonight. I'm not sure if Mr. Rustad will, but thank you so much.